everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Cabinet. So for the public record, we're going to go around and the Cabinet members will introduce themselves. We've got some apologies for lateness. Non-Cabinet members and senior officers are also joining the meeting virtually online, and I have a note of attendees and speakers. But if virtual attendees wish to speak, they should indicate with the yellow hand icon, and this will be picked up in the meeting. And this meeting is also being streamed live and recorded by the Council for subsequent broadcast via the Council's internet site. I will ask Cabinet members to introduce themselves and state their portfolio area, and this is for the benefit of any viewers watching the meeting. So I'll start with myself. I'm Councillor Perai Ahmet and I'm the leader of the Council.
Councillor Mike Hakata, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Environment, Transport and the Climate Emergency.
Councillor Ruth Gordon, Cabinet Member for House Building, Placemaking and Development.
Councillor John Bevan, Cabinet Member Housing, Planning and Licensing.
Julie Davis, Cabinet Member for Employment, Skills and Corporate Services.
Councillor Adele Dogan, Cabinet Member for Stronger and Safer Communities.
Councillor Lucia Das-Neves, Cabinet Member for Health, Social Care and Wellbeing.
Sazina Brabazon, Cabinet Member for Early Years Children and Families.
Back to me. And apologies, I believe there's apologies for lateness from Councillor Diakides and apologies from Councillor Chandwani. Is there any urgent business tonight?
Chair, we have no items of urgent business.
Thank you, Aisha. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Gordon.
I just wanted to declare that in relation to High Road West, that I was, as Chair of Housing and Regeneration Scrutiny Panel some time ago, involved in the initial opening of that scrutiny, but I haven't been involved in any of the compiling of the report or in compiling the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Item 5, which is the notice of intention to conduct business in private, any representations received and the response to any such representation. This agenda contains exempt items as set out at item 23, which includes the exclusion of the press and public. There were no representations received at the agenda publication stage in relation to the exempt items on the agenda. So if we can turn to the minutes, item 6, so can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of December as a correct record, please? Agreed, thank you. So if we can move on to item 7, which is deputations, petitions and questions. There is one deputation for consideration at this meeting. This was put forward by Paul Burnham and Keith Doby. So if we can ask them to come in, please, they'll have 3 minutes in total. Thank you. So when you're ready, Paul, Keith, if you can introduce yourselves, you have 3 minutes in total to address the Cabinet. Cabinet members will then have the opportunity to ask questions, and then the relevant Cabinet member will respond to the issues raised in the deputation. So when you're ready, 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Keith Doby and this is Paul Burnham. We've come to support the recommendation of the Scrutiny Committee that there should be an independent review into the ballot on Love Lane held last year. Resident ballots on estate demolition only started in 2018 and they are a great step forward. Ballots mean that residents must have a free and fair vote. We believe that standard was not reached at Love Lane for 2 reasons. Firstly, because of door-to-door vote collection by council officers. It was the residents themselves who told us this was going on. We've provided you with 2 sound recordings as evidence. This is not acceptable because the voter must control their vote. and be able to decide how to vote, which way to vote, and whether to vote, without landlord interference. We have no issue with frontline officers. It is the council and the cabinet which is ultimately responsible for what happened. On to our second problem. In his open letter today, Damien Tissier says that in his professional view, the Love Lane residents were not provided with sufficiently honest, accurate and unbiased information when they cast their votes. Why were the guarantees in the landlord offer and the chief executive's letter to residents shredded when Lend-Lease submitted its planning application just weeks after the ballot closed? Both secure and temporary accommodation tenants were promised new council homes at Love Lane, but Lend-Lease has put 60% of these new homes at the far end of their 10 to 15-year-old High Road West project's completion. Lend-Lease say that the scheme is now not viable, generating less than half of their required rate of profit. They are lining us up for another viability scam. Lend-Lease evidently does not want to build those council homes, and there is no guarantee they will, because there will not be enough new council homes. Soon enough, the council's promises on single move will be broken as well. Dozens of residents would be double moved on or off the estate for years at a time in each phase of the scheme. The big question now is whether the guarantees were made in good faith but subsequently broken, or whether the council made the guarantees either negligently or in bad faith. We believe the council knew or ought to have known that Lend-Lease cannot be relied on to deliver. You ought to have known this from what Lend-Lease did under the years of HDV. The close ballot result means that the vote collection and the defective resident guarantees could have affected the outcome. We therefore suggest that an independent review is the best way forward. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Do any cabinet members have any questions? No. Can I ask Councillor Gordon to respond, please? You've got 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. So thank you very much for your coming and presenting your deputation to us. I first of all want to say that I'm absolutely supportive of the role of scrutiny, and I take the role of as being a councillor very seriously, and whenever there's any challenge about whether we can deliver our services to the highest possible standards, we also as councillors, all of us, take those very seriously, of course. And if there's any engagement with our residents where we think that we haven't met the high standards, then we equally take those seriously. So when we get challenged, then obviously, you know, as councillors and as cabinet members, we ask questions, and that's been the case in this instant as well, where we've seen stuff on social media. We're not unaware of what's been going around on social media, and where we've had correspondence from from Mr. Burnham, who's sitting here as well. But we have to make sure that whatever complaints are taken up with the council are done in a fair and consistent way. And that has to be through the formal complaints procedure of the council. We can't just be responding to this or that Twitter account, or what's happened, you know, with one person saying one thing and somebody else saying another. So we have to have a fair and consistent approach, and that is what we've done. The process that took place with this ballot was the process under the auspices of the Civica. Civica is a well-respected organisation. You're a trade unionist, I know, Keith, and so am I. And Civica are used for conducting trade union ballots and lots of other respected organisations. They are an independent organisation. Civica have assured us that there is nothing about the ballot that they would deem for this to be not a well-run and a valid ballot. So we haven't got that evidence. I've seen photographs that people have sent to me personally of our officers walking down the street. That is not evidence of something that is not done correctly as far as our engagement processes are concerned. What I would have hoped is where we've got either the independent tenants and leasehold advisor or defend council housing going on the estate, that if people had got complaints, that they could have written in and used the complaints procedure. Where if they needed help using the complaints procedure, then we could have advised them on that help. But to date, we haven't received any evidence. We have said, however, that having made some inquiries, we understand that some closed ballot papers, sealed ballot papers, were taken away by officers. We didn't think that was the best practice, but we did consult with Civica, and they assured us that that wasn't, it probably wasn't the best thing to do, but it wasn't a way of invalidating the ballot. It didn't invalidate the ballot at all. So with those assurances, we have received, as I said, a couple of complaints via the council process. And I'll give you the example so that you're clear about what's been complained about. One complainant was saying that we hadn't had sufficient engagement with them, and we think that there had been sufficient engagement with that particular person. And another complainant was in relation to too much engagement, if you like, and cited 5 occasions when their door was knocked and so on. We checked against the log of what our officers have been, when our officers have been out on the estate, and the dates only married on 1 out of those 5 occasions. So that complaint wasn't upheld for that reason. So on that basis, there isn't any evidence that I can point to that's either come through our official procedure or come to me directly that would make me say that we would have to have some other independent investigation. As I said, Civica is an independent organisation that conducted the ballot. And, however independent you can get, I don't know how much more independent we can say that there is. But if we had another independent organisation investigation into this, I'm sure then people would come back and say that isn't independent because the council have paid for it and so on. I would say that, in this, it's been a very contentious issue over High Road West. Our officers have done what I think has been a sterling job in explaining a complicated document in the landlord offer. It is a complicated document. We've got lessons to learn, and we've agreed with the OSC that there are lessons to be learned about how we engage, how if in future ballots, that we will make sure that all of the different ways in which you can declare your whether you're for or against in a ballot are made available to residents, whether that's by phone, whether it's online, whether it's by post, and so on. That we will make sure that happens. We will make sure that our officers, as they were in this case, have their identity badges on, so that residents are really certain that the people that they are talking to are officers of the council, and that they know who they are talking to. That's really important. We will make sure that the material is put out in community languages, and I think we will strive as much as we can to improve those engagement processes. And so that we have got lessons that we can draw out of this process going forward. but there is no evidence that has come to us that says this, that you know, the ballot should be having an independent outside organisation coming in and re-investigating the ballot processes. I haven't seen any evidence that suggests that. I'll just maybe spend a few moments going to some of the points that that you made, Keith. It won't be the case that people will be, the first phase of the build, there will be a double decant. That is correct, but only in that first phase. That's the only way that we can do that build can go ahead. And those decants will be to nearby places, so people don't have to move their children to go to different schools and so on. And that is that assessment for those tenants is going ahead as we speak. And in the question of the viability and the development agreement, there are regular periods when the viability is reviewed, and if it is the case that the core requirements of the council are not met, then that's an issue for the council to ensure that those core requirements, the GLA funding is contingent on those core requirements being made. I think I'm hoping I've answered all of the points. Yeah, so I'll leave it there, Leader. Thank you.
Paul, it's not practice for you to come back with a question. You've presented deputation. We do have a presentation from the Chair of Overview Scrutiny, so I'm going to decline. But as ever, if you've got, you can always put a question in an email to the lead member.
The question's about taking it to today's letter, whether you read it. Is that
Paul?
Just for the record,
Paul, you've been here so many times. I think you're more than aware that there's not a dialogue at the cabinet. This isn't. I get that there's a sort of political theatre element in all of this, but this isn't the place. If you want a conversation, I'm pretty sure you can put some questions and we'll respond to them. But this isn't the place for it. Thank you, Paul. Thank you both for coming. Thank you. So moving on to item 8, which is matters referred to Cabinet by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Moyd, are you with us online?
Yes.
You are. Okay, all right. So I'm going to hand over to you, and you've got 3 minutes to present your report.
Yes, thank you. So, at the meeting on the 29th of November 2021, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, we heard evidence from a deputation calling into question the integrity and the validity of the state demolition ballot that had taken place. And we've heard some of that evidence just now from the deputation that you had. And the Overview and Scrutiny Committee recommended that there should be an independent review into the conduct of the Love Lane state demolition ballot. Obviously, we've just now heard from Councillor Ruth Gordon why the Cabinet has rejected that recommendation. I want to request that you reconsider your rejection of the recommendation for the following reasons. Firstly, Councillor Gordon has talked about using the complaint procedure. Sure, if there'd been a leaking roof in a council-owned property, for example, that is something, it would be right to complain about using the complaint procedure. Here we're talking about a historic ballot that has taken place. It's the first ballot of its kind that has taken place in Haringey. And in years to come, if this regeneration scheme has gone ahead, we don't want to hear allegations that the ballot was questionable. So surely an independent review would be the right thing to do. Councillor Gordon also talked about that there hadn't been any evidence calling into question the integrity of the ballot that took place. We heard representations from campaigners this evening, the deputation we've just had. We've heard representations and evidence at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee in late November. The Housing and Regeneration Scrutiny Panel Committee also heard evidence in early November. We've received emails. We've been sent voice recordings of alleged interference in the ballot. Surely an independent review will clarify what actually has happened. And if the council is right that nothing happened that calls into question the integrity and the validity of the ballot, then the independent review will scrutinise that evidence objectively and give the council a clean bill of health. So the council has nothing to fear, there's nothing to lose. An independent review makes sense. Now, in the agenda pack tonight, the Cabinet has presented 6 pages of explanation why the ballot was proper. Well, the work has already been done. This can be submitted to the independent review panel to look at. So whichever way you look at it, an independent review would be the most sensible thing to do. And I call on the Cabinet to reverse its initial response and to approve an independent review this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moyd. I'm going to turn to the Cabinet to see if there's any questions. Any questions at this point? Councillor Moyd, I have a question. Have you heard from any residents directly? I'm just conscious that the 2 gentlemen in front don't live on the estate. I know that there's a residents group that's involved, but apart from that, have you heard from any residents? I'm just conscious that there are a lot of people who live on that estate, having visited myself numerous times, who speak English as a second language, etc. Have you heard from any of them directly, or has all the evidence been second hand?
No, I have heard evidence from residents who live on the estate. I've got voice recordings that have been sent to me with the residents speaking about what has happened. And from what I've heard, the offer was there available to me to go and visit those residents. Unfortunately, I was self-isolating recently because of COVID, so I hadn't been able to go and visit them. But I have no reason to doubt that the voice recordings that I've received from residents directly speaking about their experience, that there is anything to question that evidence.
Okay. I mean, I guess it's just, as I said, it's just worth reiterating, as Councillor Gordon, you may have heard in her initial response, it'd say if there is evidence, it should be presented, via the usual and correct channels, and then they'll be considered in that correct way. But so at your panel, did any residents present at that panel? So the people that came to ask for a independent investigation, were any of them residents on the estate?
Well, we had the campaigners, and they've spoken to residents, and they came to us. But like I said, that doesn't change the fact that residents have fed into have fed into the deputation that we had this evening at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting, at the Housing and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee meeting. I don't think that the evidence that's being presented is being made up. I mean, surely that's not what you're suggesting.
No, it was a direct question. Did any residents present? And I think the answer is no. Do any other Cabinet members have any questions? Councillor Davies.
Yes, I just wondered if we could quantify how many ballot papers you feel were tampered with, falsified, stolen, deliberately lost, or how many residents you believe were coerced into voting a way they didn't want to vote.
Well, that is the point of the independent review, and all of that evidence will be presented to the independent review. I mean, it's not for me to comment on those specifics of what has actually happened. The allegations are there, calling into question the integrity of the ballot, and those allegations can be objectively scrutinized before an independent panel. So I don't see, if the council is right, then the council will be proven right that nothing untoward had happened. So I don't see any problem in approving an independent review.
I'd just like to come back on that. You take my point that for this to be relevant, it would mean that such a significant number of ballot papers were lost or stolen or deliberately falsified, that it would make a difference to the outcome.
Well, not necessarily. I don't agree with that. That you need to have. I think if there is evidence of one ballot paper being tampered with or interfered with, I think that's one too many. And we need to ensure this is the first ballot of its kind that's taken place in Haringey. It's a historic ballot. And, we don't want to be in a situation in years to come when, people would say that the state, Lovelane state, was demolished on the back of a dodgy ballot that had taken place. So surely it's in our interest to ensure that whatever questions have been raised are independently scrutinised.
Would you accept, Councillor Moyed, that were that to happen, the model that you've just presented would leave it open to any future estate ballots to simply tamper with one ballot paper for the whole thing to be re-examined and rerun?
Well, I don't accept that. I mean, I don't think we can speak hypothetically about what might happen in a future ballot. We can speak about the ballot that has taken place. And in my view, I have seen enough evidence to suggest that it needs to be scrutinised independently.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Moyed. And just to be clear, the evidence you have seen has been from campaigners. Okay, which I think you've said. All right, so do any other Cabinet members have any questions? Because I believe then what we're going to move on to is Councillor Moyed will continue to present his report, and then there'll be an opportunity for Councillor Gordon to respond and for further questions. Unless there's no further questions at this point, we can move on. Councillor Moyed, you're there.
Yeah.
The rest of the report.
Okay, thank you. So I refer to the Cabinet response to the scrutiny recommendations, which are on pages 121 to 130 of the agenda pack, just for the benefit of those who are watching at home. There were 15 recommendations in total, and the Cabinet agreed 10 of those recommendations, which I welcome. They only partially agreed the other 5 recommendations, and I'll address those recommendations and call on the Cabinet to adopt specific recommendations unequivocally. So the first recommendation, which the Cabinet partially agreed, it was about the rent levels and the service charges for tenants moving to a new property on the regeneration scheme. And the recommendations said that the rent levels and the service charges should be at the same level. The Cabinet says that there would be a 10% increase on the rent in the new properties, and that although the Cabinet response does not clarify that there will be an increase on service charges, this can reasonably be assumed that there will be an increase. So this would present a double whammy for tenants. And I call on the Cabinet to adopt the original scrutiny recommendation so that the rent levels and the service charges are at the same level. Recommendation 5, there were 4 strands. The Cabinet agreed to 2 of them and only agreed to the other 2 partially, but those were on technical grounds, and I have no problem with that. Recommendation number 10 related to businesses on the Peacock Industrial Estate on Tottenham High Road and White Hart Lane. Now, these are the businesses that are slated for demolition without prior consultation with them, or without adequate prior consultation, I must emphasize. Some of these businesses are family-run businesses that had been passed on for generations. And our recommendation was that where it would be unviable for those businesses to move out of the area, or where there are legitimate concerns about loss of freehold rights, that the council should design regeneration schemes or placemaking schemes, whatever you want to call it, with those businesses, ensuring that there is a mixture of residential and light industrial units. We believe that this is a strong recommendation, and again, I urge the Cabinet to agree to this fully. Recommendation 11 was about providing a compensation package to businesses so that they're not out of pocket. And it's not entirely clear, reading the Cabinet's response, why they're partially agreeing to this. I would urge the Cabinet to agree to this unconditionally. The final recommendation, recommendation 12, it recognises that while there is an estate demolition ballot in relation to council estates, there isn't an equivalent protection for existing local businesses. Their units could be demolished, but they would not have a say, in the same way that council tenants would have a say about the future of their estate. So the scrutiny recommendation was that the same principles should apply to local businesses. We're not saying that there should be a ballot, but the principles that underpin a demolition ballot should also apply to businesses, and this could be in the form of consultation, and that any regeneration plans are drawn up with their active input. So we urge again the Cabinet to agree to this recommendation unequivocally. Just to sum up, I call on the Cabinet to agree recommendations 1, 10, 11 and 12, the ones that I've just talked about, which the Cabinet had only agreed to accept them, partially. So I want to thank you for adopting the other recommendations, but these are the comments that I have on the ones that you are only agreeing partially. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moyd. So if I can turn to Councillor Gordon, who's going to respond to the report.
Thank you. Just to sort of reiterate what I've said, really, that I've read all of the material that's been sent in to me. I've listened at least 3 times to the transcriptions that have been sent to me. I still cannot see anything in there that is evidence. I would caution, by the way, about circulating material, people's names and addresses in it, because I do think that is probably a breach of their data. I'd also sort of caution about anybody going on to the estate and making claims this, that and the other. So some of the claims that, just taken from the recording about what is the motivation of the council in terms of the antisocial behaviour on the estate, I find that a little bit disturbing, that antisocial behaviour has been seen as something that is deliberately agreed to by the council. I mean, I find that quite offensive, really. And I don't think that is very a good way of campaigning, if I might say so. What I would say is that of all the evidence that I've seen, there is nothing that would merit my recommending here that we have an independent inquiry into this ballot. I cannot see it, and I don't think you've seen it either. Just moving on to some of the other issues. In terms of the...
just a point of order, please. If I could come in. Councillor Gordon is still talking about agenda item 8. We've already moved on from that. We are at agenda item 9.
Yeah, so she's just responding to that, then she's going to move on to 9. So she'll respond to your other points now.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So in relation to, you raised the issue of, the rental increase. So that was put out to all of the residents of the 10% cap on any rental increases, and that was laid out in the landlord offer well before the ballot, and so we are obliged to stick with that has already gone out to residents. And in terms of the service charges, just to be aware that the service charges are pooled across our estate, so that they, whatever service charges are agreed in the future will be the same for all tenants. I was wondering whether I could call on officers to come in and relate to some of the points on the businesses that were raised, if that was okay.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Yes, in relation to businesses, I think the reason for... Sorry, Peter Brown, Assistant Director for Regeneration and Economic Development. In relation to businesses, I think the reason for partial as opposed to a complete agreement of the recommendations is centred on the way they're currently written as recommendations risks putting the council in a position where it could be exposed to a blank check principle. How we compensate businesses through, for example, compulsory purchase order processes is set out by legislation, and so I don't think it's the spirit of what is being recommended or suggested that caused difficulty. It was taken literally. It could expose the council to a position whereby it is, as I said, potentially in an unknown blank check type position. I think that was the primary difficulty.
Thank you. So I can now turn to questions from Cabinet members. Is there any questions? Councillor Brabazon.
Yeah, I note that recommendation 2 is fully agreed. And given the fact this is for a lessons learnt review and a report will be going to your committee, are you content to accept that the lessons learnt review is one which deals with some of the substantive issues raised in this discussion this evening? It's your recommendation which has been agreed.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Brabazon. There is a distinction between what we recommended as part of the scrutiny review, lessons learnt internally. So this would probably not hear any external evidence. So we are obviously happy that the Cabinet has accepted that recommendation, and that should go ahead. But that is very separate from the other recommendation that we made, which was that there should be an independent review.
Don't worry. Well, I just find that extraordinary, since the comment from on the paper here is about the committee was concerned to hear allegations, blah, 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 and you list it, and your recommendation was for a lessons learnt review, so it's the same issue. That's a comment more than a question, Chair.
Now, could I...
Hang on, Councillor Moy, apologies. This isn't a dialogue, so it's not. Technically, it's not questions for you at this point. So Councillor Brabazon's making a comment there as a Cabinet member. So I'm going to turn. So it's not a dialogue, I'm afraid. You've presented the report. The Cabinet members responded, and it's open to questions from the Cabinet, as is usual practice. So do any other Cabinet members have questions at this point? No, I believe that there are some backbench councillors who may, and I've got Councillor Barnes on the list. Are you online, Councillor Barnes?
Hi, yes, sorry, I am online. I just wanted to ask more about the why what lessons had been learned from the conduct of the ballot, because we have more ballots forthcoming, one which will be talked about later. And if we're not going to learn the lessons and put something in place to have a complaint or a review request, then what else has been learned? Because there are, as I said, more ballots forthcoming, and we need to deliver those properly and not be open to all of these questions.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bonds. Well, I think, well, first of all, it isn't just that there's, been a lesson learned review and then that's it, done and dusted. It's going to be, it will be an ongoing process that we are, committed to. So, obviously, going back to this original ballot, then where we've, we clarified with Civica about postal votes being taken away and posted, and this was because this has been raised before because of mobility issues, where those ballots were posted. That is one lesson learned, but there are other lessons that we think are very, very important, which is about making sure people have got a full understanding of any landlord offer in their own languages, whether that we have done sufficient in order to communicate to our residents in the community languages, especially when you've got a very complicated document. So we're going to be trying to doing a lot more of that, doing a lot more to assist people in making sure that they know that there are different ways in which they can place their ballot. It's far more extensive than it would be in a general election or even a local election, where the only way that you can vote is that if you go to the polling booth, or you've already in advance got a postal vote, or you've got a proxy vote. When you're doing one of these ballots, there's far more different ways you can vote: by phone, online, by post, in person, into a box provided by Civica, for example, and that sort of thing. So there's lots of lessons we can learn in terms of doing that. As I said, in terms of identifying, making sure our officers are well identified on the estate. I would say that in Love Lane, our officers are very well known to the residents because they've been engaging with them for several years now. So most of the officers are well known. I think where people have complained to us about strangers coming onto the estate, because people know who lives on the estate and who doesn't, and we would want to make sure that whenever there is a future ballot, which obviously there will be one coming up on Broadwater Farm, that people are really clear about what is being proposed in Broadwater Farm, which, as you said, was coming up on this agenda item. So I think there are, it's an ongoing process, and that we will continue to make sure that we hold to the very highest standards, and we are always continually reviewing with our officers about codes of conduct, about having a script, making sure that they understand that they are just allowing people to know what the options are, and that it isn't their role, of course, to persuade one way or the other. The role of the officers is to just ensure people know the facts so they can make their own minds up, and that is very clear to officers.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. I believe I've got Councillor Amin who wants to ask a question. Are you there, Councillor Amin? Can we just check if she's online? Councillor Amin, are you there? Can you hear us? Okay, let's just give her 30 seconds and then
I was just to say that Councillor Ammon has written to me this evening, so I could respond to her email that she's sent to me. I don't know if it's the same issue, though, of course. I will be, of course, be responding to her anyway.
Yeah, so I thought she was here to ask a question, but she's not online. She might be having technical difficulties. Okay, is there any more questions online? I can't see any. All right, so if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve There's a councillor waiting to speak. Sorry, Sorry, we weren't notified of this, so we're just going to check because I had no awareness. I've not been informed that anyone's here to speak. Yeah, so let's just check. So just for people who have tuned in, there was, we thought there may be someone here to speak, but officers have just checked and there is no one here to speak. So I was going to allow them to put a question, but they're not here. So I'm going to move to the resolution. Obviously, if there are any questions, they're more than free to put questions to the Cabinet Member or myself. Councillor Davies.
Sorry, it's just a very quick question and it's for the record. If there is any evidence of tampering, falsifying, deliberately losing ballot papers, can Councillor Gordon give us an assurance that there will be a full investigation and, if necessary, ballots rerun?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, so if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve recommendations as set out at page 140. Do we all agree? Agree. Thank you very much, and thank you to the deputation and to Councillor Moyd. Okay, if we can move on to item 10, which is the demolition of Tangmere Block on Broadwater Farm. This is for the award of contract, and Councillor Gordon, if I can hand over to you to introduce the report, please.
Yes, thank you. Well, this is for the a contract award for the demolition of Tangmere on the Broadwater Farm estate, and I have to say, this is like the first stage, really, in what I'm hoping will be a very, very ambitious plans and a sort of once in a generation opportunity to transform the Broadwater Farm estate. If we are successful in the ballots that will be taking place on Broadwater Farm, then what we're hoping to be doing there is not only building 300 council homes at council rents, but also dramatically improving the public areas of the estate and providing as an estate that will be, much safer, much more secure, and with having homes, not only the homes replaced that are having to be demolished because of health and safety reasons, but also having a huge improvement to that estate and providing homes that are of very high quality. But obviously all of that is subject to the ballot as a yes vote in the ballot that is coming up. The demolition contract is for just over £2 million, and the demolition itself of Tangemere will take 10 to 12 months to complete. It's just to say that obviously all of the previous residents in Tangemere have been rehoused, and any leaseholds properties have been already acquired, and those were all completed in December. So we're moving on fairly swiftly. There are in addition savings that the council will have because of this, which is because of the security costs of keeping a vacant site. When it's still there, we'd have to have security issues, which would be at a cost to the council. And if the cabinet agrees to this recommendation, then we would hope to start the demolition process in March.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Is there any questions from Cabinet members on the public part of this report? No, I believe we've got... Oh, sorry, John, apologies. I should put my glasses on. Okay, Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, just for clarification, can you update us on the second block that is due to be demolished? Is there any chance that the works can run consecutively a bit later on, or run on after this one is done?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure of the exact date for, you're talking about Northhold. So I don't think that I'm not sure they could be run consecutively. We've got to make sure that what we do with this first demolition is to have a sort of deconstructed master plan, if you like, in the area to make sure that residents are disturbed the least when all of these demolitions are taking place. And we want to make sure that residents feel that it's safe and it's handled and so on and so forth. So I can see that the Mr. Sherrington is online, so I think some of the details I'd maybe hand over to him and from an operational point of view, if that's okay.
Thank you, Councillor. So the timing of the demolition of Northhold will be determined. At the moment, we've still got some leaseholders who we're negotiating with, seeking to get that building vacant later this year. The timing of the demolition will be done in consultation with the contractor who's doing the new build and the wider master plan that's going to be emerging over the course of the year following the procurement for the new build contractors. So that is something that we want to progress promptly, but we need to do it in coordination with all the other works that are going to be going on the estate, and that's something that we'll be working through over the next few months.
Okay, thank you, David. Councillor Catter.
Yeah, because obviously this was agreed in 2018, which predates our climate action plan, which in that we were aiming for a zero carbon or net zero carbon on council as a council by 2027. I'm just wondering whether the release of embedded carbon in these kind of developments were factored in to that, or is this something that actually might have an impact on our ability to reach that we need to look at offsetting?
I'm going to have to pass over to officers on that. I mean, we have got a zero carbon target on our house building programme, and we are, at least 4 of the schemes have come up as zero carbon. On the other schemes, we are getting at least 50% of the building regulations and going up to 70% on some of the other schemes. But on the specifics of the inclusion of the Broadwater Farm demolition of Tangemere, I'm not sure, so I'd have to refer to officers or get you a written response on that. I don't know if there's an officer that can answer that particular question.
If I can just pick up one element, in terms of the demolition itself, there is a requirement of the contractor to do a audit of the demolition process and what can be reused, recycled or repurposed, so that we understand the environmental impact of the demolition process. In terms of the question that you've asked around its relationship to the zero carbon commitment, I'm going to have to revert back to you separately, I think, unless Peter can pick that question up.
I think on that one, there's going to be two ways it's considered through planning. One is through the environmental impact statement, which will understand the impact of it. Because this is a demolition, it's a little bit different. Because this is a pure kind of estate regeneration and new build. You'd be looking at it from a planning perspective. It's now a requirement to look at all of this together. The bit I'm also hesitating on is because of the precise sequence of events here. So Tangmere having been identified as having structural problems needing to come down and then needing a response to that, I just would need to check with my planning colleagues to make sure I'm giving a fully accurate response on that one.
Thank you, Peter. Any more questions on this part of the report? No, I believe Councillor Barnes, you have a question.
Thank you very much. I've got a couple of questions. One relates directly to the ballot question and what will residents be asked, given that they have already been decanted from this particular building at Tangmere. And what concerns do you have about the fact that the selected tenderer had the lowest qualitative score of all of those bids? And then my final question is around the window for communication and engagement on this. Before the demolition is due to commence, it's really not very long at all. And given the council's previous record on communications and engagement, I wondered how confident you are that this schedule is realistic and allows for engagement with a majority, if not all, of the affected residents on Broadwater Farm and in the surrounding streets.
I'll come to the second question first, really, about engagement. I think probably, if anything, I mean, I've been up myself onto Broadwater Farm several occasions, and there's been an enormous amount of engagement with the residents over going back some time now, until to the extent probably that the residents say, when you're going to get on with it, going to get on with the whole process. And this will be part of, I think, a certain amount of, at least what I have picked up from going around the estate, a sense of certain relief from the residents that you've been talking about this and you've been talking about this, and then at last you're getting on with it. So I do think that will be seen as part of getting on with the project. Obviously, the remainder of the project is entirely reliant on the outcome of the ballot that will be starting next month. And sorry, could you just remind me of your first question, Councillor Barnes?
So I just wondered what the exact ballot question would be that residents are being asked. And then I also asked about the qualitative score of the bids and the fact that the winning tenderer has the lowest one of those scores.
We're still discussing the offer of that will go out, which will include the ballot question. I don't know if that's in the public domain as yet, actually, and we refer to offers. It will be a very straightforward question, I can assure you, but I don't think that's been the exact wording hasn't been agreed yet, so I don't want to speculate any further on that. Obviously, we're in discussions with officers about it, and I wonder whether I could get officers to come in and respond to the tendering process.
Yeah. David Joyce, I think, wanted to come in first. And then
it was just to say we'll write to Councillor Barnes to refer to the relevant part of the previous Cabinet report in terms of the ballot, and obviously when part of that Cabinet report delegated the subsequent detailed wording of the ballot offer document to myself in the delegated authority report, and we're still going through that process, and obviously that report will be published in the normal way in due course, so we will of course share that information once it's finalised. And I think on the procurement question, if David could come in, what I do know though is that I think the appointed contractor has got a very good record of a demolition project nearby, and has done that to an excellent quality, but I wonder if David could come in.
Yeah, I can just pick up there. So the winning contractor was also the contractor who was successful in the tender for the demolition of the old school that is on the border of the estate, and that demolition, whilst a lot smaller, has been very well undertaken, and the feedback from the school has been very positive in the way in which they've managed that process in partnership with us. We also know that that contractor has done a very similar project in Portsmouth, which they are over halfway through, which is the deconstruction of significant LPS tower blocks, and that project is running smoothly as well. So we're confident that the contractor has got the track record, both from our experience of them working with other local authorities and with ourselves more recently on the demolition of the school. Clearly, all contractors can, their performance sometimes varies, and we'll be monitoring that very closely with our consultant team and our internal project management team. And a detailed engagement and consultation plan will be developed as referenced in the report as part of the construction management plan that the contractor will be required to put together following the award of contract.
Thank you, David. I don't believe there's any more questions, so this decision will be taken after consideration of exempt item 24. Councillor Diakides has joined us. Councillor Diakides, I believe you have a declaration to make.
I think it is in relation the enterprise hub in particular, is a non-pecuniary interest to us. I represent the council in one of the organizations who are currently tenants in one of the buildings there. Therefore, when we come to that item, I would declare an interest and I will leave the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Diakides. If we can move on to item 11, which is the Broadwater Farm Regeneration Funding Agreement, and over to you again, Councillor Gordon, to present the report.
Thank you. Yes, so yet again, we're starting to gather together in this report some of the funding that would help us to clear the way to having a generational change on Broadwater Farm estate. So this report is for the Cabinet to accept £1 million in capital funding from the Department for Levelling Up and Housing and Communities, and it will be used as a contribution towards the leasehold acquisitions in Northhold and what we've already spent in Tangmere, and the £1 million will go into the housing revenue account. So I would recommend that we accept the funding.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Any questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Hakata.
Yeah, in terms of Broadwater Farm, obviously this is, I guess, third time lucky. So, it's been through a couple of iterations, and the earlier, its history is obviously, is quite checkered, and part of that has been down to the design. So I noticed in the report it does make a major point about the co-design and the designing with residents of that spaces, and I really just wanted that to be underlined, and you to just sort of give some reassurance that work is undergoing, so that this will be third time lucky. I think this will be the first time, if this is the case, that that area is done in a placemaking approach has been taken with the estate.
Yeah, well, obviously the first step is for us to make sure that the residents understand what the opportunity is before them, and hopefully they will be voting in favour of this going ahead. There has been an enormous amount of engagement so far. We've had translators on the estate. We're engaging in the community languages, and we will continue to do that. But there is a community design group already established. We will continue to make sure that we bring in as many fresh faces onto that community design group as we possibly can. We are particularly interested in making sure that we get input from the women on the estate, and we are particularly interested in making sure that we've got input from young people living on that estate. And especially, we've got the Lost Blocks Collective, and there's loads of groups on that estate that are absolutely desperate but to have a sort of new beginning, if you like, for Broadwater Farm. And I think it's a sort of testament to this particular administration's commitment that we're actually getting on and doing this now. And I'm determined that we are really quite enthusiastic and exercised by the whole process of what we can actually achieve on this estate. And I think it will be brilliant. It will take us some years to build it out, but I'm really hoping that we will do this, but we will definitely, absolutely do it with the residents at the forefront of those designs, as they have been to date.
Very well put, Councillor Gordon. Any more questions? Councillor Barnes.
Thank you. Just quickly, because of course the £1 million grant is very much wanted. Is there any risk that the timetable could slip and any effects that could occur that might actually lose that funding if we weren't able to report against the milestones, or there were alterations to that? And what mitigation is in place if there was a dispute about, for example, the ballot, or if there was a no vote, to make sure that that £1 million of funding can be secured?
I don't think there's any danger of slippage, losing this particular funding. It's a capital fund which will cover money that we've already spent in terms of acquiring the homes in Tandmere and in Northhold, where there is a danger that if the ballot was, for example, was to vote no, if the residents were to vote no in the upcoming ballot, then what we would lose is the funding from the GLA, which would mean that we would have no scheme at all. And quite frankly, I think that would be a terrible position to be in, and for not just for the council, but for absolutely for the residents. So yeah, that's the danger. But I'm hoping we are going to convince the residents this is going to be a great scheme coming forward.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. So if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out on pages 151 to 152. Do we all agree? Excellent. Okay, item 12, which is the Civic Centre project, and this is the award of enabling works contract and project update. And I'm going to ask Councillor Diakides to present the report.
Thank you, Leader. This is the next step in the process that we have agreed already. Members will remember that there are two elements. The Civic Centre itself is a listed building grade 2 and involves a legal obligation on the owner of the building to maintain it and keep it in good state and all that kind of thing. In addition to that, obviously, since the council happens to be the owner, we at the council have got a general responsibility on ensuring others in similar situations conform with this obligation. Therefore, we've got a double sort of like pressure on us to make sure that it is like this. The building is aging. There's no doubt about it. The maintenance costs were increasing on one kind or the other. It was becoming outdated and so on. And in the past, we didn't have the resources. We weren't able to do more than patch up jobs and keep it just going. But now it reached a stage where we discovered as well asbestos, therefore had to vacate it and all that kind of thing. And the maintenance costs are said to be becoming more and more expensive in the future the longer we leave it. And we were able now to put together the resources and do it up in a proper way, we hope, so that way we will save on future security costs, maintenance costs, and have a modern building that is suitable for the post-pandemic, if you like, type of style of working and so on. The second part, though, is the original plan had also the provision for the civic centre, had a provision for an annex, which was never materialised, but the space is still there, and it was suggested that it would probably be a very good value for money if we were to build an annex, a modern annex there, and accommodate staff that at the moment and other functions that at the moment we're using far more expensive buildings elsewhere to put them in. We asked for the officers to work on a proper feasibility study to look at the costs and benefits of that proposal as well, because it did make sense. If we were to go ahead with an annex like that in the future, it would be better to do it in one contract right now together with the civic centre. And that is in this report now. We've got the results of what the specialist team that we had of technical officers, finance officers and consultants worked out about the costs, and they're indicating that it seems like it is a good value for money that will save the council some money in the future, quite a bit of money in future years, and as well as provide accommodation for about 900 staff as well in the area in proper up-to-date settings with low energy costs, low maintenance costs and so on, and that also will enable the council in the future the flexibility on how to use other buildings that it's got, or how to leave buildings that are very expensive to lease at the moment that we're using, and so on. So that is the stage we are, and at this moment in time this report is asking us to endorse the approach now and go ahead with the next stage on that, as well as to authorize the officers to do the immediate decontamination, asbestos removal and other and essential works. So I think it should be a straightforward approach. I recommend that we go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Diakidis. Any questions? Councillor Hakata.
I really like this plan. I think it's really important that we have a civic centre that, you know, is representative of the borough and representative of the values of the borough and the way that the residents and council work together. And I think it's fantastic, and it's you know, going to be designed to the highest environmental standards, etc. But there was just one element. So looking through it, and there's a lot of attention given to the new ways of working, and I also agree with that there is certainly a new sort of culture of working nationally, if not globally now, and hybrid working, etc., locality working as well. But one of the fundamental sort of planks of this council, this administration, is insourcing. So I just wondered if we were to, and that is our default position in terms of the delivery of services. So if we were to deliver all our services as insourced, I just wonder how that marries with the current division of percentages in this report.
Can I say that there are a lot of uncertainties, obviously, about the future and how many spaces we would need for how many staff and where exactly we'll locate, all that kind of thing. And this is down the road. I think this project will be completed in 4 years' time, let's say. That's the time when the hard decisions have to be made. What it would allow us to do is two things. The one thing is, we know that post-pandemic especially, but it just there is a different way of working, involved. It doesn't necessarily mean that we know exactly how much would be remote, how much is sharing offices and all that kind of thing. This is a matter of the council deciding eventually in the light of developments, and how much spaces we would need in the light of our insourcing requirements and changing working practices and all that kind of thing in the future. What I hope this project is allowing us is the flexibility of the council 3 to 4 years down the road on how to use the various other buildings that we own, and see how many we need this way, how many we could probably let out to somebody else or use them for something, some other facility and so on. It doesn't preclude us. What it indicates, nevertheless, is that we will be able to accommodate the same amount of staff there with less cost, as well as having the possibility, the flexibility, as well as being enabled to operate in the new environment, which is quite crucial as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, I'm sorry to raise this really what might be considered an irrelevant issue, but it has been raised before. We have been told there's a nuclear shelter bunker at this centre somewhere, whether it's underneath it or next to it. So I've got two concerns. It's never mentioned anywhere in any papers. So I'm concerned it might impede the construction, or we might discover something that puts the costs up. So that's my first concern. And my second point is, it was been mentioned that this could be connected perhaps with the War Museum and become sort of a visitor attraction as something from the very distant past. And I know these seem really small issues considering the project, but I'm just concerned that they're not really mentioned in the papers ever.
Can I just say, just very, very quickly, yes, there is a bunker there, because until a few years ago, the arrangements was civil defence that in case of any emergency, the chief executive takes control of the borough and chooses the most important people to go down on this bunker. And the first thing you would do when you get appointed chief executive was you're taken down to London and you get trained on how to handle it, that kind of thing, etc. I believe that this has gone now, basically, but I'm not sure. But the bunker exists down there. I haven't visited it yet, but I know, Jonathan, you have, isn't it? So I will ask Jonathan in a minute to tell us a bit more about it. Whether it has any historical significance, I'm sure there are plenty of those around the country, so it's not going to be unique, and I don't think it's been associated with any particular historical incidents, but Jonathan may know a bit more about it.
Thank you, Councillor. So with it being a listed building, all elements will be reflected in that statement of significance that we have on the building. So its current level of importance or not will be recorded. In terms of us obviously being very much aware of the bunker there, the current surveys and bits that we're looking at on site, ground investigations that people have seen taking place, have really helped inform us at the current stage of design. Initial thinking is that things will lend itself in terms of plant and equipment, so obviously in terms of ventilation, heating, etc., which gives us a good opportunity rather than having to put it on areas the way we normally would, like the roof, which could obviously have a bit of an impact on a Grade 2 listed building. So current plan is very much aware and probably looking at servicing solutions for within the building.
Just add that we got the steering group as well. It's a co-design project as well, who obviously can look at it and see whether there is any innovative way of utilizing this space, and just make some extra use of it. But at the moment, it is being looked at. It has been taken into account. It's been assessed and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, we don't need to lobby to get onto any lists then. And no. All right. Okay, any more questions? Councillor Dasnev.
It was merely really a comment, Chair, though I find it hard to follow on from the bunker really as a topic. It was just to draw Cabinet members' attention to that presence of locality working in the report, because it's a really important part of how we see the future of delivering services in Haringey. We know that it will provide better provision and be much more related to the communities and the needs of our community. So, and myself and within adult social care, we're certainly looking forward to pursuing that, and we've begun work in Northumberland Park. And I just wanted to draw that to everyone's attention. There's a really key plank of both how we deliver services and how we work with the community and co-produce to make those services better and listen better to them.
Thank you, Councillor Dasnev. Any questions for any Cabinet members on the public part of the report? No. So Councillor Barnes.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a few questions on this. So the first one looks at Appendix A, where it says that refurbishing Alexandra House to use as council accommodation will cost £35 million, which is more than the refurbishment of a listed building and more than building a whole new annex. And this would be on top of the nearly £4 million that was approved in November. But the refurbishment to let it out for commercial use would only be £1.7 million. And I wondered what the reason was for that very large discrepancy. My second question is about the Cabinet report in November also said that the investment approved at that meeting would bring Alexandra House up to a good standard and it would create a suitable office environment. It did accept that additional work would be needed on the heating, cooling and ventilation system, but that these costs would not typically be anywhere near the scale of the costs mentioned in this report. And again, I wondered what had changed since November, because these figures are quite large. And then there's also an analysis in option 1 that gives a figure of £0 for the annex, can't speak, which seems to assume that the council would neither dispose of the car park nor develop it in any way. Whereas option 2 seems to assume rental income from Alex House. So why are you not comparing like with like? Is that an attempt to skew the figures in favour of one option over another? Or is there another reason for that?
And I think some of the answers to that question are technical, so we'll ask the officers in a minute to expand. I just wanted to say that I think I bought at the figure of 35 million for Alexandra House, etc. That was officers' estimates at the time about what it would cost if we were to refurbish it completely in a different style, the type of thing that we would do with a completely new built, modern building for the modern requirements, which obviously is an absurd figure, you know, that kind of thing. But that's probably explaining the difference, that if you want to let it to somebody, basically in order to maximize income, you don't need to spend that kind of amount of money on it. But this, as well as the other issues you raised about the car park, etc., I think I will ask Jonathan to explain them rather than me putting my foot in it with some of the technical details. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So when you have a complicated project, we try to get as much like-for-like comparison as possible. So the paper that was coming through in November was very much looking at a good usage of Alex House for our short-term usage before moving to a civic centre, and then also for letting it out. In the purpose of running in the business case, and so that things like the net present value calculations could be done, etc., it is looking at a similar lifespan across both. So lifespan you would get from an annex building compared to the lifespan of Alex House. Obviously, retrofitting a existing building does always give you more challenges and technical challenges than actually having something new that you can work with, where you've got almost a clean slate, so to speak, as in the car park. So very much it's about trying to be able to show like-for-like comparisons between them. In terms of the car park option, I think you mentioned there being nil in one of the papers. Again, we have an opportunity where there is some letting of facility through vacating for council use, Alex House. That's where some of the income comes from there. So again, it's comparing like-for-like options as opposed to bringing in other factors like disposals of a car park area for housing or anything else. So really it's about trying to just get, as I say, as much comparability between the two options.
Thank you, Jonathan. So the decision for this will be taken after consideration of exempt item 25. So if we can move on to item 13, which is the Wood Green Youth Hub, and this is for the fit-out award of construction contract, and I'm going to hand over to Councillor Brabazon to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. I hope that this will be agreed by Cabinet tonight. This is one of the most positive reports that's come before us in recent weeks, and it's been a very long time coming. It's asked Cabinet to agree the tender for the and contract for the new Wood Green Youth Hub, the fit out. which we hope will be complete by July 2022. As colleagues know, it's been a very long time since we had any youth provision in Wood Green, although Wood Green has had high levels of youth violence, high levels of youth unemployment. There are very needy families in the Wood Green area, but we have not been able to identify a property until recently where we could develop a youth project. Happily, we have got projects in the heart of Wood Green on Livingston Avenue, which, as usual, needs a lot of work. Hence this tender contract for over £1 million. However, this contract will provide a youth space which has been designed, co-designed, but with young people working with architects, a group called Wood Green Young Voices, who have been very actively engaged in the consultation and design process for the premises. I'm not sure that there's actually much more to add except to ask you to agree the tender, which is all set out in the document, with the company being awarded the contract. It is for £1,069,000, and we have to issue a letter of intent to Diamond Bill PLC. This is in the body of the report, and I would ask Cabinet to agree.
Thank you, Councillor Brabazon. Do we have any questions from the Cabinet? Oh, apologies, Councillor Catton.
Just a quick one, although I would like to just underline, I think it's a great it's testament to the approach that it's been co-designed with the Young Voices of Wood Green. I think that's fantastic. Just wondered, maybe I missed it, whether, because it seems like quite an ambitious target to get it up and running by July this year. Just wondered if there are any risks associated with it not being completed by that time. I don't know if I missed it.
I'm sure there are risks, because we are in a world where building work is very volatile. However, I know David Moore, who is the capital officer, is here, who could give you a much more detailed response on my rather superficial reply.
Thank you, Councillor Brabazon, Councillor members, and Councillor Carter. Yes, there is a risk associated with the delivery of the construction contract. We are looking to award the contract, or full contract, to the contractor as soon as possible, and enable them to place the orders for materials. We do have a residual risk in the industry at the moment with material supply, and we have taken that in consideration in our specification of the materials used for this project, and that would continue to monitor that risk on engagement with the contractor, and would report back if there is any significant realisation of risk regarding material supply or resources. Further to that, we have carried out some initial works where we have taken some contamination and addressed some fire safety issues, so we are confident that we have reduced a number of the risk already.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, Councillor Barnes.
Thank you. Actually, Councillor Brabazon answered all of the questions I had in her introduction, so thank you.
Thank you very much. The decision for this will be taken after the consideration of exempt item 26. So if I can move on to item 14, which is delivering a Wood Green Enterprise Hub. I believe Councillor Dakides has stepped out of the room for this one, and I'm going to turn to Councillor Gordon to introduce the report.
Yes, thank you. So this is in relation to the creation of an enterprise hub in Wood Green, which is sorely needed, and it's the utilisation of our own council premises, which is where there's, I think there's 5 floors, I think I'm right in saying, and 3 of those floors have been used for council accommodation, which we think we don't really require them, and they could be accommodated elsewhere, which would mean that we'd have all 5 floors available to offer workspace workspaces, which is we're in dire need of in Wood Green. So what we are suggesting with this recommendation is that we issue a lease out to a workspace provider and go out to tender for inviting those. It means that what we can do is to, within that lease, to ensure that the community wealth building values that we have as a council can be prominent in that lease, and that the social value outcomes that we want can be prominent in that lease as well. There will be some additional savings to the council because the operation of the building will be taken out of our operational portfolio, so that will net us anything between 60,000 and 100,000 a year in savings. And obviously we would have the income from the lease at around about 200,000 per annum. But the main thing is that we are able to provide an enterprise hub. We are aware that there is a thriving creative sector in Wood Green. We are also aware that there's an increasing demand for workspace for local entrepreneurs. So, in view of in light of the discussion that we had recently at full council about Haringey's commitment to small and medium-sized enterprises and the local business community, I think this is an example of where Haringey are proactively ensuring that we've got the sort of workspaces that are in demand in the area, and that will be encouraging startups and new businesses and so on. So I think it's a very good move on our part. Saves us some money. There is some external funding that we would be able to use as part of a capital grant, which is £780,000, and that would go to refurbishing the property in order that it could be made ready for all 5 floors to accommodate different types of workspace available. So we think that's how we can prepare a proper enterprise hub for the area, and we think it would be very beneficial to the businesses that require those spaces. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Any questions? Yeah, Councillor Catter.
Could you, you mentioned the sort of thriving arts and culture organisations and businesses that can use it. Just wondered, obviously, important. One of the issues of high importance for this administration is social value. I just wondered, because obviously it won't be run by the council. It will be run by a third party. I just wondered what kind of social values are we hoping to embed in any kind of agreement with that third party?
Well, we've had quite a lot of discussion about this, and we are making sure that when the tender goes out, that those social values are absolutely embedded in that tender. And we will also be ensuring that, because obviously there are existing tenants in there who are small businesses that are existing tenants on 2 of the floors, and we are absolutely ensuring that that space will be protected so that they aren't, having to look for any other space, and will be included. And obviously then we are expanding the space, but in light of the values that the council are putting forward, that will be embedded into the lease.
Thank you. Any more questions? No. Okay, I don't have one for Councillor Barnes on this one. So if there's no more questions, if we can move to resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at page 222. Do we all agree? Great, thank you. Okay, item 15, which is the Wellborn Health Centre, and this is the approval to sign side agreements with the Haringey Clinical Commissioning Group and HealthLink, and I believe Councillor Dasnet will be introducing the report.
Thanks, Chair. As the Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board, I'm keen to see us provide the primary care, the GP services that residents need and want. Whilst we clearly don't manage or control the NHS or indeed its processes, we have worked very closely with them as partners, and there are now plans in place for several new facilities for primary care across the borough in Haringey. The Wellborn has a long history and narrative, and this decision comes far into that journey, I believe. But its aim is to enable the NHS, in essence, to fund a new health facility and ultimately for residents in the locality to have the services that they need of a modern facility. And under those circumstances, I recommend the report to you all.
Thank you, Councillor Das-Neves. Any questions? Councillor Barnes? Apologies. Sorry, Councillor Barnes, apologies. I missed Councillor Hakata, who I should have known had a question. So if you would have come in, Councillor Hakata.
Well, I'll keep it really simple. Just, are there any complications that we should be aware of in terms of this going forward?
Thanks, Councillor. I'll leave the technical details because we've got Jonathan here, and I think we've got Owen on the call, Owen Sloman from the NHS as well, to deal with that. Put really simply, I understand that what I'm presenting to you today is, in essence, for the NHS to draw down the funding it needs in order to open this health centre and fit it out. We need to have a lease with that entity before the building is handed back to us by the developer. That's pretty simply what it is. And of course, under those circumstances, we have put in some guarantees to make sure that should the building eventually not come back to us in a sensible time frame, that there would be penalties. However, you'll see that we have a very long time frame on that into 2024, and it's well expected that the building will come back to us before that time. So there aren't any particular concerns that we'll be needing to enact that risk, if that makes sense. But I'll leave the technical details to Jonathan and Owen.
Great, thank you, Councillor. The only points to add to that very good summary in terms of the technical points is just to draw attention to the two tables, table 1.1 and 1.2 in the report. The building is very close to completion. We have some strong legal agreements that we have to have in place to ensure the securing of the NHS funding and agreements between ourselves and the NHS. They fall away, and then we move into what I would describe as a much more normal sense of agreements, lease agreements, with the usual caveats that you'd expect in there, should it not continue to be operated as health facilities. I know colleagues from Health, Owen, who's appeared on screen, have also certain rights as well within those agreements to ensure that it's also protected for health provision before the council then, by default, come back to having a facility, a building that we can use, and Owen may wish to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, nothing to add. I heard council does absolutely, and we will need guarantees that if we put in the 3.6 million pounds, what happens if a health centre isn't possible because the building's not right? But the risk is very, very small, and there's a long time frame for that risk to be managed. I thought Councillor's present description of it was the simplest and best, I think.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Sorry, Councillor Barnes, now I can turn to you.
Thank you. Just two questions. Given that you felt the need to negotiate a backstop to deal with any delays, what percentage chance do you think there is of the centre being ready by the end of 2022? And when does the time-limited contract for the primary care facility in Hale Village run out?
Thanks. I'll hand over on the technical side to officers.
So if I take the first question, then the second one probably is for CCG colleagues. In terms of the backstop date, we've negotiated in the spirit of a partnership as long a backstop date as possible to minimise any risk that the council could be incurring, hence why we've gone for 2024 for what is effectively, as you see in the report, and you've mentioned, Councillor, a fit out that should be completed by the end of this year. Similar to the earlier report we had, we're confident that the scheme is nearing completion with our partners Argent. We are exposed to any of the risks within the construction market and COVID at the moment, but based on everything we've got and the NHS partner who, Health Investment Limited, who will be doing the fit out, who are experienced in this, we think we've mitigated them as best as possible. We've got those risks and contingency plans in place. One is time frame, the other will be the usual contingencies in terms of budgets. So that's the first question. Owen, in terms of the lease?
Yeah, so I think there's also a point about when the health centres open. I think likely early 2023 by the time they actually get in and build it, but that sort of time frame. The other point on your Hale Village point, I believe there's an understanding with the landlord there that the practice will be able to remain until such time as we can move it into the new health centre. We're all absolutely desperate for that to happen, as you can imagine, and the sooner the better.
Thank you very much. Oh, it is, okay. All right, so if we can move to the resolution, there's no more questions. To approve the recommendations as set out at page 231 to 232, do we all agree? Agreed. Okay, item 16, which is the financial arrangement for the next stage of the council's housing delivery programme, and I'm going to hand over to Councillor Gordon.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be presenting this report to Cabinet. So we're essentially looking at here the next stage of the housing programme delivery and the financial implications. There are four main points in this report. So the first one is the acceptance of the GLA grant of £127.5 million. And obviously I'm very keen that we agree to accept that money. I think this sort of is almost symbolic as well, in a sense that that we've got as a flagship policy that we are building our own council homes, and we have gone a long way in order to do that. We've got a lot that are either already been let or have started on site or in the planning process, and we are working as hard as we can with our amazing housing delivery team to actually get all of those through and get residents settled into the new homes as quickly as we can. But I think what this indicates with presenting this report today is our further commitment as a council to our house building programme. That is part of the core reason for existence of this council, that core activity is central to this administration, and accepting that grant is also, if you like, a sort of symbolic of the confidence that the Mayor has in us as a council, that not only is he willing to hand over the money, but also that he knows that it will get spent, and that we have sort of proved, if you like, our ability to deliver a very ambitious programme, and this is confidence that we are going to be able to continue to do that. So that's why I'm very pleased that we've done that. I will, if you will just indulge me, Chair, because I just do want to say that one of the proudest things is not for me about getting the numbers right, because we are always going to be running to stand still on our housing programme. As more people come forward on our housing register, that's already increased dramatically, even since I've been the portfolio holder on this programme. And so, unless we get a different government in, quite frankly, which gives us the real finances for building council homes, then we're going to be running to stand still, no matter how many we build. But what I think we have done with this programme is put forward a programme of homes that are of high quality design, that are energy efficient, where sustainability is important to us, where we have taken seriously the green agenda as well. And, in terms of things like, basic things like the installation of all of our new homes have got air source heat pumps. That means that the homes will be cheap to heat. That's very, very important to residents. As we all know, how our bills are going up dramatically. When we've got cheap heating in council homes, that's very important to our future tenants. The use of solar panels, of green roofs, of energy efficiency appliances, passive house principles where we can, and the increasing biodiversity on the schemes that we've employed. So that was a bit of a plug for just what a good high quality build we are looking for in all of these schemes, whether that is a small scheme of 4 homes on an infill site, or whether it's a more ambitious scheme like we've got at Ashley Road Depot that will be coming forward quite soon, of almost 250 homes on that site. So they're all equally ambitious. So I just wanted to sort of put a little plug in there for our very good house building programme. The rest of the report also includes some different changes for you to hopefully agree. One is to do with the right to buy receipts, and I was having to use 50% of the right to buy receipts for the acquisition of new homes, as opposed to where we were previously doing that, using right to buy receipts for the acquisition of existing homes. This is to do with falling in line with new government guidelines that have come forward. We've also want you to agree to some additional contingency for some of the schemes that are listed in the exempt part of the report. We recognise that it's a very volatile situation in terms of building for all builders. We are not exempt from that, and we're wanting to make prudent but precautionary measures to make sure that the contingency that we've got in place is sufficient to cover costs on these particular schemes that are underway, and we think that is a prudent measure to take at this particular point in time. And then lastly, it's the report is also asking for the removal of a small number of sites, only 3 sites, from the list of acquired sites. So obviously all of the sites that we've been looking at that won't necessarily be brought forward, but that we want to look at, have already gone through a cabinet decision. If we wish to remove those sites, then we must also obviously come back to cabinet to remove them. So it is just 3 sites, and they are listed in the report of Canning Crescent, the Scouts Hut on Wolves Lane, and some land adjacent to 200 Moselle Avenue. And those are the 3 that we will be asking to remove from the list of approved sites on the housing delivery scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Are there any questions from Cabinet members on the public part of the report? Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, just to say that this is very impressive. I mean, when you look at these papers, it refers to all the contractors must pay the London living wage. It refers to 6 new sustainability standards and 9 new design standards. So I think we can safely say we'll be in a totally different world to what went on at Grenfell, obviously. There's just one question. It says here that funding is not available for units that replace homes that have been demolished except in exceptional circumstances. Can you say that those circumstances exceptionally apply to us?
Well, obviously we had the exception on Broadwater Farm, which was gone through previous discussions at the cabinet level, which was to do with health and safety. So those were exceptions in those cases. And then the other obviously instance would be on High Road West, where there's it's been subject to a ballot that has gone in favour of that scheme going ahead and the demolition taking place. I don't know if there is something that I have missed, so I might ask officers to help me out on that one.
So I think that comment refers to the new programme, Councillor Bevan, where they've really tightened up the rules around using the funding for demolition, whereas obviously the schemes that you've referred to, Councillor Gordon, are in the existing programme. But Robbie Erdman's on the call. I did see him put his camera on. Do you have anything to add, Robbie?
I was going to say exactly the same thing, David, so I'll come off at this point. Sorry, did people hear what I said? Well, I was going to say exactly the same thing as David.
So Robbie, sorry, we didn't quite catch that.
Sorry. I was just going to say that David's absolutely right. This is in a different funding programme, which is why it's not that the obsolete point is not relevant for Broadwater Farm or High Road West.
Thank you, Robbie. Councillor Carter.
Yeah, I just want to say, that this report is real testament to the hard work, but also the leaps and bounds that have occurred in a very short space of time from the publication of the internal audit, Mazars audit in 2019, November 2019, which had a number of questions over, for instance, based on the building up of the team and project management and all of that. And I think that was something that was all of that was taken on board. And there's been an incredible move towards, like you say, and a really incredible delivery of homes. And I just wanted to underline here that 4 of the council's current schemes will meet zero carbon already. All the others will achieve over 50% reduction in carbon over building regulations, with most achieving over 70%. With new homes enhancing biodiversity and high quality landscaping, planting suds and green roofs, which is all absolutely incredible. All I would want to underline, and just hope that we can sort of work together on, is the fact that obviously, land is at a premium. The need for viability is absolutely essential, which does mean that obviously we are going to be building on lots of brownfield sites, lots of areas external to our existing estates. And I think it's really important that those kind of elements, that increase in biodiversity, that attention to the green and environmental aspects and to the quality of that space, is going to be essential in moving forward, so that we're not over densifying at the expense of quality of life.
Yeah, thank you. And obviously, when we come to building homes, that what we have got to do is where possible, we build them on our own land, because there's a shortage of land available for massive great housing schemes anyway, and certainly that would we aren't in a position where we're going around just buying huge tracts of land. Obviously there will be difficult decisions to be made where you're putting a house that's I've yet to find a way where you erect a house without it being made of some sort of concrete and bricks and so on, and there will be some controversy. We know almost on every scheme we have some people who object to the schemes, whether they are ours or whether they are other house builders, and it applies to us as well. But what we are doing is trying to push at those at the edges and keep pushing to make the schemes the best, so that and I think hopefully we'll come back to this discussion when we discuss the housing strategy document that will be presented at a later cabinet meeting, but to make sure that we are setting an example. That is my ambition for our housing programme, that we set an example that we are providing high quality homes, and that's in terms of design. That means that when they're designed so that the airflow through the homes, for example, is good, that where we've got the aspect for the homes in terms of whether they don't get overheated and so on, which is another issue, and that the public realm is of a very, very high quality. And the more that we can push that and provide an example that the council is the one setting a very high standard, I think that is all to the good, and that's what this delivery programme is about. And lastly, I would just add that I do think that now we've got some real expertise within the team that is delivering this program, and I am always extraordinarily impressed. I'm going to do a bit of creeping here around the offices, but I am always very impressed whenever I go on a site visit of their depth of knowledge and more importantly, their depth of experience of being project managers on, with other organisations, and that they've come to us. And lastly, I would say that their enthusiasm is very, very infectious, and I think that is in part because of the high quality of the housing programme that we're putting forward. Very enthusiastic team. So my thanks to them as well.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Move to Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Councillor Almert. I've got 3 questions. The first is, does the target of 3,000 homes by 2031 include those which have already been built or started since 2018, or is that number in addition to those built or started since 2018? Secondly, really good that 4 of the council's current schemes will meet zero carbon, and will this become a requirement of all schemes going forward? And finally, what does the council now plan to do with the land adjacent to 200 Moselle Avenue that has been determined not suitable for housing?
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. I think in Moselle Avenue, there was a question of a sale on that house, so it just means that it isn't feasible as far as I can recall from the report. But I've maybe asked councillors to comment on that. And we are talking about a target of 3,000 homes over 10 years. I don't know if Robbie is on the. I know he's on the call. I wonder whether you could come back and just add to that, Robbie.
So I could write to Councillor Barnes about the future plans for the site. I'm not, from a housing delivery perspective, we obviously don't have any plans for that site. In terms of the target, it's 3,000, including the homes that we've built already. And on zero carbon, we try as much as we can to get as close as we can to zero carbon on every scheme. It's not always feasible, but as I guess sort of technology and building performance improve on this, I'm sure we'll get ever more schemes going towards zero carbon. It is a target for us to get as close as we possibly can, but sometimes we because of the particulars around an individual site, we can't quite get there.
Sorry, could I just clarify, because you gave 2 different answers there. Robbie said that it was 3,000 homes, including those started since 2018, and Councillor Gordon said it was from 2021 to 2031, it was 3,000 homes, and I just wondered if you could clarify which of those was correct.
No, it's 3,000 in total, is what I said. Up until 2023? No, 33.
Our first completions were in 2021, Councillor Barnes.
I'm sure you'll agree, pretty impressive numbers there, Councillor Barnes. Okay, so if I can move on, which is, the decision for this will be taken after the consideration of exempt item 27. So I'm going to move on to item 17, which is the variation and extension of housing related to support contract, domestic abuse service, and Councillor Das-Neves will introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Preventing domestic abuse and supporting survivors of violence against women and girls is obviously a key priority for us in Haringey. The Domestic Abuse Act 2021 places new duties on the council in this area, and as we plan and prepare our approach and response to the Act, extending these contracts will provide continued support to women who need it in the borough, and is on that basis that I recommend the report to you all.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Barnes.
Hi, just one quick question, because we know that the demand very much outstrips the provision that we have available. And so we wondered, were there plans to create more facilities in the future?
Thanks, Councillor Barnes, and I'll let officers, I think Beverly and Zara are on the line, come in on a bit more technical. You will have seen in the consultation that is out, the public consultation on the budget, that we are putting in, or proposing to put in some more money in the budget to increase our support for women and to make sure that we have the right services in the right places. We're also currently now, as part of the review and thinking about how our service delivers in the context of the new Act, thinking about how we best use all the physical spaces that we have and all the capital funds that we have in order to make sure that women can and do access service in the borough. But I'll let Beverly and Zara come in on some technical.
Thanks very much, Councillor Desnes, and thanks for your question, Councillor Barnes. Beverly Clark, Director of Adults and Health. Just to add to what Councillor Desnes has said, we are obviously very committed to responding to the new duties and to increase the provision of safe refuges. You may be aware of the development at Burgoyne Road that is ongoing, and that's refuse provision for a number of people impacted by domestic violence. It's also fair to say that as we go forward and develop further provision, we're very much working in tandem with victims themselves so that we can make sure that we actually develop the provision that is very person-centered and very appropriate for the support that people, both accommodation and support that people have identified.
Thank you, Beverly. So if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out on pages 277 to 278. Are we all in agreement? Agreed. Thank you. So item 18, which is water, wastewater and ancillary services contract, and Councillor Davis to introduce the report.
Yes, this report appears at 285 of the pack. This is about awarding a new contract for our non-domestic and wastewater contract, which expires early in this year. So we're fairly urgently setting up a new contract. We're just the recommendation is on page 286 of the report. I don't know whether officers have anything to add.
Rob.
Hello, I'm Rob Ski. I'm the Assistant Director for Planning, Building Standards and Sustainability. Thank you, councillors. I think you've covered it well, but just to add, we already have a contract with the proposed provider, which is Wave, and that the work is currently onboarding the previous contracts from the previous supplier called Castle Water. So that work is ongoing. Wave is already performing well, and so this recommendation is to create a new contract with Wave to carry that on for the next couple of years or so, and we think that also represents good value for money as set out in the report, that this is only a very small increase in the costs, and it's good value for money in that the onboarding is still happening, and moving to a different supplier would have much greater costs. And that's all I will say on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Any questions?
Yeah, Chair. I just want to say I think it's really important that our schools are encouraged to join this, and I think it's very encouraging to see you've got another 15 lined up, and I'd really urge that we can get as many more as we possibly can of our maintained schools into this as part of our overall support programme for our schools. So it's just an urging, really.
Thank you. Any more questions? No, and I don't think I've got anyone online with questions. Okay, so the resolution is to approve recommendations as set out at page 286. Are we all in agreement? Great. Thank you. So item 19, which is the Bruce Grove Public Convenience Construction Works Variation. Councillor Gordon, over to you again.
Been a busy bee tonight. Yeah, so this is for a variation of a construction contract award, and it's in connection with the Bruce Grove former public toilets refurbishment. For those of you that don't know the east part of the borough, then it is just opposite Bruce Grove Station. It's a Grade 2 listed, quite small building, and obviously if once the restoration is and refurbishment is completed, then it will be able to be removed from the Historic England's at-risk register, which is where it resides at the moment. The idea behind it, just to remind colleagues, is that there would be a new cafe and sort of mini community hub, if you like, and therefore it will become a social value asset for the borough. In the 1st of April, the contract award was for just under 900k, and we're looking at needing an extra 128,000, which would take the whole overall contract to just over 1 million. The delay has been for some things to do with COVID, but more to do really with a boundary issue with Network Rail, and the variation in the contract is required because that's created some delays, and obviously there's been some uplift in the construction costs while those delays, while we were trying to work through those issues with Network Rail's boundary to the site. Obviously, the upshot of getting the refurbishment done will be to upgrade that whole area and to provide, as I said, a community asset in terms of a cafe and community hub, and it will also ensure that we can get 375,000 from Heritage England, which is a grant that is part of this refurbishment process.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Kessa.
This is probably more of a comment actually, but I've got to say I always shed a little imaginary tear when I pass old public conveniences, because I think they are historically very convenient. So, but it has to be said. I actually always celebrate the fact that there's one on the high road that's now a pub, and this is going to be a community cafe stroke hub, etc. So, of course, so that's a good thing, but there is a point here, which is that as we design our sort of especially our walking strategy and getting more people active and moving around the borough, they are going to be in need of visiting conveniences which aren't necessarily pubs and cafes and community hubs. So I think we just need to keep in mind that as we get more people walking, we also need to have that other convenience available and need to think about how we're going to deliver that.
Thank you for your toilet comments and some toilet humour added in there for good measure. I would just say actually that there is another cafe area that is that we've been working on for some time, which is Cafe Roge in Duckett's Common, and there we will be providing public toilets. I mean, actually, I've had some discussion with some members of the public who are very keen that we provide more public toilets. The issue is, of course, as we always raise in these meetings, about ongoing maintenance of those facilities and making sure that they don't get used for antisocial behaviour, but that they're kept clean and usable for the public. I do think it's an issue, and it's an issue for not only people who are more walking and cycling, but for delivery, delivery vehicles, so they want to stop, for taxi drivers and so on. It is a big issue, actually. On Duckett's Common, we are at the moment we've just been laying. I don't know if we've finished yet, but we are laying the drains for a fully accessible toilet that will be part of the new cafe that will be in that, and that is a cafe and community space that can be hired, and there will be quite extensive opening hours in there. But obviously we've got the advantage there that the management of the cafe is a way of ensuring that the toilet is kept clean and so on. But maybe we come back to the whole discussion about public toilets, because although we had a little bit of a joke because you can't help it, but generally speaking, it is a very serious issue, because of, like I say, delivery vehicles that wanting to stop people on motorbikes and on bikes and so on, cargo bikes, delivering stuff around the borough. But yeah, we're doing our best, and this will be another cafe opportunity.
Thank you. I think there's a challenge there for David and Peter to go away and think about. Yeah, sorry, actually, David wants to come in.
I think an important point to make is that we are making sure that the end operator will make the toilets publicly available, and that will be a requirement. So there will still be that access.
Thank you, David. Any more questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Davies.
Well, it was on that point, really. There are European cities where there are schemes where shops and restaurants will allow non-customers to use their toilets. We could perhaps look at doing that in the borough.
Just talking about my experiences in other countries of easy access as well. Okay, has anyone else got any questions, or shall I turn to Councillor Barnes? Okay, Councillor Barnes.
Thank you. As my last question, but I just want to add to the request for public toilets the thought of benches, because if people are walking, I know some people need places to rest as well. But going back to this particular report, it says in the report that the price is increasing due to market pressures, and those pressures look to be continuing as we move forward. So should this almost 15% cost increase be treated as an early warning sign, given the large planned expansion in the capital programme and what a 15% increase could indicate for the council on a range of much larger projects than this one?
Thank you. We're looking for, an increased contingency. It doesn't mean to say we have to, that we will spend that, but we are aware, obviously, that increased costs will occur. Increased costs occur anyway when you've got a delay in a scheme, which was entirely because of this issue with the boundary between the site itself, which is a very peculiar site and very tight up against the railway line. It's difficult to say. I've heard, I was listening to a report on the radio just, I think it was yesterday or the day before, of some house builders who are saying that actually things seem to be levelling out in terms of construction costs. Others are, I've got a different story. It's very difficult to tell. We still, I think, feeling the repercussions of Brexit as well as the pandemic. It's almost anybody's guess really as to what we're trying to do is take precautionary measures in whatever schemes that the council are involved in to make sure that we have got the contingency available. I don't know if officers wanted to add anything to that.
So the only thing to add is obviously this scheme was tendered prior to a number of those significant increases, which is why we're seeing them come through retrospectively in this case. For a number of them that we're bringing forward, like Civic Centre and others, the standard industry BCIS type rates have already started to factor in those levels of increases. So what we report going forward does actually take into account those market conditions that we're seeing.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, so the decision for this will be taken after the consideration of exempt item 28. So if I can move on to item 20, can Cabinet note the minutes of other bodies? Just if you could just say noted or nod your heads. Right, thank you. And so item 21, which is significant and delegated actions, again for Cabinet to note. There are no new items of urgent business, so if I can move to item 23, which is exclusion of the press and public, we will now consider items 24 to 30, which contain exempt information in relation to items 6, 10, 11, 14, 16 and 17. So I'd like to move that the press and public are excluded for the remainder of the meeting, so we consider the exempt information as defined under paragraphs 3 and 5, part 1, schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Can we all agree? Thank you. So I'm now going to close the public section of the meeting, and so we can just confirm the live stream has stopped before we continue with